Good evening and welcome to the channel's studios here in London with your international news around the world in 5. Russia has launched a wave of airstrikes against cities across Ukraine, including Kyiv. At least 11 people, including a child, were killed in an attack that hit a block of flats in the central city of Uman. Meanwhile, the State Emergency Service of Ukraine released a video of emergency workers extinguishing a fire after a strike in Dnipro, where a woman and her 3-year-old daughter were killed. Explosions were also reported in the city of Kremenchuk in central Ukraine. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said the apartment block was among 10 residential buildings that were damaged in Uman. The former US Vice President Mike Pence has testified as part of a criminal investigation into alleged efforts by Donald Trump to overturn his defeat in the 2020 election. Mr. Pence sat for more than 7 hours before a federal grand jury in Washington, D.C. He was issued with a subpoena to testify under oath earlier this year. The questioning by prosecutors took place behind closed doors. His appearance came just hours after an appeals court rejected a last-ditch bid by Mr. Trump's legal team to stop Mr. Pence from testifying. The BBC chairman Richard Sharp has resigned after an independent report found he breached rules for public appointments in relation to a loan for then Prime Minister Boris Johnson.
I have decided that it is right to prioritise the interest of the BBC.
Mr. Sharp said he had agreed to a request to stay on until the end of June to give the government time to find his successor. The country's public appointments watchdog has been investigating the way in which Mr. Sharp was selected by the government to chair the broadcaster in 2021.
I feel that this matter may well be a distraction from the corporation's good work were I to remain in post until the end of my term. I have, therefore, this morning, resigned as the BBC chair to the Secretary of State and to the board. It was proposed to me that I stay on as chair until the end of June, while the process to appoint my successor is undertaken, and I will, of course, do that in the interests of the corporation's stability and continuity.
The Supreme Election Council is set to announce the final list of candidates for the presidential elections scheduled for May the 14th in Turkey. President Tayyip Erdogan faces the biggest test of his 20-year rule in May elections that will decide not only who leads Turkey but how it is governed. The opposition picked as its presidential candidate Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, leader of the Republican People's Party, and formed an alliance aiming to appeal to voters from the left and right, as well as those with Islamist roots. The opposition promises to reverse many of the policies of Erdogan, who has championed religious piety, military-backed diplomacy and low interest rates. And the Stone of Destiny has left Edinburgh Castle for the first time in more than 25 years as it heads to London for the coronation of King Charles III. The stone, an ancient symbol of Scotland's monarchy, was seized by King Edward I of England in the late 13th century and taken to Westminster Abbey. It remained in England for 700 years and formed part of the coronation chair on which kings and queens were crowned. The stone was returned for permanent display in Scotland in 1996, but it was agreed it would return to Westminster Abbey for any future coronation ceremony. And that's your international news around the world in 5. Now back to the channel's studios in Lagos.